Power and Microgrid at Hatch, and he's an expert in hybrid solutions for mines and currently working on large wind and solar project for a mine in northern Canada. Another project, a large solar project in Senegal, and here working with BHP and South 32 on their decarbonization efforts. So, over to you, Michel.
Thank you, Adrienne. So very pleased to host this panel, which will discuss the global development in hybrids and microgrids for mines. We've got a great panelists here, and I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves if you want.
Hi, so I'm Simon Carey from Energy Estate. I've a long background in the development of microgrids and all sorts of challenging places around the world, particularly in Africa.
Okay, great.
Dean Toole, I'm with Agreco, so I head up the commercial side of our business for microgrids and storage.
Jeff Hobley from ADL, General Manager of our remote energy business.
And Daniel Trujillo from AGL. I head the Business Energy Solutions team.
Okay, thank you all. And I guess the presentation by Todd is a really great introduction to our discussion that we'll have in the next 50 minutes. Certainly, I do see that in the last 24 months and even in the last 12 months, we're really going into a global energy transition, which is driving those hybrid power projects, which are also driven by the sustainability goals that many of the mining companies has put forward. So before my first question, I'll just give some history on some hybrid power. If we look at some of the first one with Bonaire Island with 11 megawatt of wind power in the Caribbean on a load of 7 megawatt. They're reaching 75% penetration instantaneous, not conventional over the year. But that was the first project which motivated other projects that followed, like the Diavik Mine project in Canada, in the Arctic, 9.2 megawatt of wind power, and then the Raglan Mine project, which has done its first phase in 2014 and second phase in 2018, with 6 megawatt of wind power and 3 megawatt of batteries. And what we're seeing through this period is technology improvement, battery robustness, cost going down, and performances in the equipment. And I'll address to the panel now the recent development, what we've been seeing in Australia in particular, the recent projects. What do you see the kind of new achievement that we're obtaining from the recent projects in the last few years?
So speaking from my perspective, and I'm relatively new to the mining sector, maybe 6 months, certainly less than a year into it, is that we certainly see, as represented by the panelists that have been up here previous, is that there's a more and more embracing of it. I think the reality is it still has to be economic, and while there seems to be some appreciation for some of the renewable attributes that come with it, if those aren't necessarily quantified, my experience has been that unless other things are all equal, they're not jumping up and down just to put in renewables simply for the sake of putting in renewables. So it's up to us to also continue to drive down our costs, to demonstrate that the system also ensures reliability at a LCOE that's competitive with what their alternative would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I suppose for me the big thing, from many years where I couldn't even get anyone to spell it, let alone be interested in investing in it, in terms of microgrids, that's the big change now. This is now mainstreamed. So Total just bought Go Electric yesterday, and they're going to put it under Saft. Shell has bought Go Energy. Energy, who was one of the first players, is in there, but you're seeing this was effectively an unloved part of the energy sector. It was often left to the miners to go and sort it out themselves or cobble it together, and that's to me one of the really big changes now. You're actually seeing more and more capital come in, teams coming together. I mean, people like EDL and what you did over a number of years, you were doing it by yourself. It was hard yards because there was no one else out there. And that's where you go to mining in Darwin now. It's changed, and I think that's the positive direction now. We've got bigger teams, more capital, more OEMs coming into the space, and better sharing of lessons.
And Jeff?
Yeah, look, I think over the years that I've been working with EDL, we've moved from an environment where nobody wanted to talk about renewable hybrid stations and penetration of renewables. The attitude was very much, look, show us the money, one day maybe this will come along, to reflecting upon last year when I presented at this conference. It was all the talk of that conference was around renewables, and now we find, that every customer we talk to is interested in this space, and we find that we can look at our existing customer base and say, we can offer you a proposal that will reduce your costs by installing some level, whether it be a battery or some level of renewable hybrid in their existing solution, or building new greenfield stations like the Agni project, which really present those opportunities to push the envelope and demonstrate what can be done.
Daniel?
Yeah, maybe a slightly different angle that we bring for being a retailer. We've seen that over the past 2 years, we follow the development of utility scale solar, all the push from the developers to actually be able to finance these deals. They've been inking all these PPAs. So the conversation has started with PPAs, solar PPAs in front of the meter. And look at the prices. People have been captured by the prices, isn't it? The tagline of $50 a megawatt or $40 a megawatt or whatever they have been transacted on. And I think that's caught the eye, of course, of the executives of mining companies, which have different mines. Normally you have portfolios of mines, and many of them are grid connected. And what we see is they come to the market and they ask people like us, can we have a PPA with that? It's like having chips with fish. It's just like, can we put a PPA on that too? And that has created and escalated, I think, to what we see today, which is all the mining companies talking about really decarbonizing and has fueled part of this pushing to decarbonizing. And I don't see it going back. I think that it's just getting momentum, and those taglines in terms of price are driving interest, and then they come with a price that they want to match, and then they drive people like us to actually try to get to that price and compete and find vendors that will supply us equipment that will allow us to get there. Like what I was talking about, doing cheaper by forgetting about outside costs.
Yeah. So I can tell that it's nice to come to the conference and see 2 or 3 new projects being announced, but to also understand that it took quite a while to get from the idea to the announcement, and so when you go from year to year, I mean, I've been 3 years at the conference here in Perth, and in Toronto we have a similar conference with Adrian. 6 years we've been going. I can for certain tell that the underground type of projects that are pipelined to go to construction is much longer in terms of list right now than it has ever been. And so it's nice to see 2 announcements at the conference now, but next year and the next following years we're going to see 3, 4, 6, 10 projects announced, because they are in the making, and it takes 2 to 3 years from the time you start planning them and you can announce them. So we do see that, and the notion that you mentioned about we need to have the business case to work, which is absolutely right. But after all the studies, I kept saying the previous years, business case doesn't work, we need grants. Now there's more and more that at least break even, and some are actually working without grants, like Todd mentioned. it's definitely driving and accelerating these projects to go forward. So maybe one question about this enabling, aside from pricing, this necessarily technology that comes with this revelation. Maybe can you discuss what you think is driving the price down in terms of technology to enable those hybrid power projects for mines?
So it comes from a combination of things, right? You're starting to get scalability. I think it's also that we have other ways in which we're able now to be able to de-risk projects, right? And that includes, early on in the battery storage business, we were using lead acid batteries that were manufactured by Bob, right? Now we're dealing with Samsung and LG Chem, so it's a bankable product, right? So we can de-risk some of the equipment in a way that also allows for us to reduce the price, aside from the fact that we're getting that scalability. So, and some of it's also on our business strategy and how we approach the customer, and we help them de-risk some of the elements. So what's become quite obvious to me within the mining sector, right, is every time we reduce a bit of fuel, right, we're also, particularly for remote locations, we're removing a tire, right? We're removing maintenance. We're removing a number of other elements that I would suspect, 4 or 5 years ago, we weren't very good at being able to, correlate the reduction of that to, ensuring that we're reducing the overall cost of the project.
Yes, okay.
I think a move to modular, and by modular I'm not just talking about the modular solar like Sunshift 5B on Cambridge. I'm actually talking about modular hybrids. One of the costs, and as you all know better than me, in Australia it costs pretty much the highest cost in the world to design anything. And if you have to go and design everything bespoke for each mine, you're embedding a level of costs into your solution. So the more that we can come out with modular solutions for the mining industry, so I can provide a 2.5 megawatt block of solar storage and wind, and effectively then design that up. That type of approach is, I think, what will also help us drive down costs. And there's certainly people working, people like Wilson Transformers with SMA, with their block, and what they're doing, and that's what I'd be encouraging people to adopt. We don't need to all do something different. We need to end up doing something which we talk about collaboration, but we'll all benefit if I think we don't have to redesign it each time.
Yeah, I think these are all good points. The additional piece I'd add would be just the diversity of suppliers, and the experience that suppliers get is also driving down their cost, because their perception of risk and their confidence in what they can do. And likewise, ourselves as a supplier is finding exactly the same thing. As we do one project, we learn from that project, we understand how we can deliver a lower cost option of the next project and take that forward. As Todd was saying, we can install less enabling technology and have greater confidence that we can achieve the outcomes, and do what we say we're going to do.
Okay. Yeah. Look, I think they touched upon what it is. The point that I'll make is it is that space where commercial and technical merge. So these are engineering solutions, but they have a big commercial impact, which is big money. Engineers don't know too much about what they're designing. It's bespoke. It's completely different if it's standardized. If you have standardized design, it's much easier to deliver. Your suppliers, they know what they're doing. Installers, they just the field force understand what happens. If they don't understand what they're doing, it would, many of you are an engineer, and if you're designing something that is kind of new, we'll put big contingencies, and then we'll go to the commercial people that don't necessarily understand what the engineers have done with the contingencies, and may even put some extra contingency in there. Once the engineering team understands what they're doing, and they reduce the contingencies, and they can explain it to the commercials, and the commercial understand what is happening, and they can see some story on it, they reduce the contingencies too, and suddenly it's the same project 5 years down the track, and it is 40% cheaper.
Yes. So, to summarize some of the very good points you made, because we're trying to drive the price down, and you talk about modularity. A lot of the cost of projects is not so much the equipment, it's to install it, and partially in remote location. So solar is very cheap, but in some remote locations, and particularly in Canada where it's very remote in the Arctic, but in Africa or in Argentina, it's very far. And Western Australia, there are places that are very far. And a lot of the cost of the project is in the labor and the time it takes to bring it there and install it, not in the solar panel cost. So modularity is very important, and for high penetration it gets even more complex. So that's a good point. The other part that you mentioned, the time it takes to get a contract and actually operate, and what you were mentioning is the notion of having standard contracts, standard negotiation, legals, share risks, all of that being documented such people has precedent and go faster into those areas. Because stakeholder acceptability of these projects, which is multi-parties, takes a long time. And that would save a year, maybe sometime, in legal fees, in discussions, and that also builds up into the price of the project. Last thing is technologies. Definitely, Todd has mentioned it, bigger wind turbines, bigger blades, more efficient solar panels, lower costs on batteries. Those are driving projects down. But just my next question is a little bit more technical, but it's certainly very important, is there are some sites where you've got to deal with heat that is generated by the gensets, or steam, like at Cannington. You get steam generated, and if you put too much solar, then gensets are producing less steam. And last year I presented the project we did in Argentina, which was, there was as much steam produced in electricity, so high solar projects would just, essentially, you would need to produce the steam using natural gas. And so that deteriorates the business case of the projects. How do you think we can deal with those projects for which business case might be more difficult, because you're dealing with not only electricity but steam that you get for free from the gensets?
So I'm a great believer in solar thermal. Even if so far in Australia, we have spent lots of money but have developed very little. But it's not just the actual solar thermal technology itself; it's actually the heat capture technology. And you take a leaf out of the book, the Danes and the other Scandinavian countries around heat capture. So there's really some technology coming out of Israel. So last week was the Australian Energy Storage Conference, and much more focus on thermal storage than there has been for a number of years. Lithium is not going to solve all of our problems, but I think thermal storage and how we capture and re-deliver that heat and use that heat. So there's a range of companies coming out now and looking to bring the technology from different applications, but effectively into remote locations.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, look, I think the simple fact is that each customer will have different needs. Each customer will require, a different mix of renewable and traditional technologies to deliver the solution that is going to be optimal for them. And it's a matter of working very closely with the customer and ensuring that that relationship is maintained and that the collaboration is strong between them. That's the simple way to do it. I mean, there are technologies to deliver every manner of solution you could need. It's just making sure that the fit is right.
Okay, just one last question on those type of questions. One of the things is, and probably DL can provide more background on this, but we've seen projects with Digusa Mine, and you have Cannington, and we've got Raglan Mine. We all have PPAs with an IPP and a mine buying the energy. How do you deal with curtailments? How do you deal contractually with the fact that, you to make your project business case work in real operation, you've got to deal with the fact that you need to sell or deliver as much solar or wind power as possible. On the other hand, the mine has to make sure that they can operate in a stable fashion and not have to jeopardize the operation because they're trying to integrate more wind or solar. How do we deal with that in a smoother way, or what are the lessons learned to make future projects go through that hurdle more easily?
So I don't think you can fit a square peg into a round hole. Like, we can't force some of these issues simply because we know that it would be ideal, right? It still needs to be economic. So we can build a bigger battery to deal with some of the spillage that otherwise would occur, right? And over time, I think we'll find other technologies. In fact, there's lots of five guys in the garage that are building really cool batteries right now. The problem is they're not bankable, right? But at some stage we will achieve that in the not too distant future, whereby we can then redistribute that energy at a much more economical basis than what we can today when what you just described happens. You know, the way we approach it, right, is we look at a multitude of variations of renewables, right? Various sizes of solar, wind, and batteries in combination with the load profile, and so forth, and try to come up with the optimum solution. We sometimes will have a challenge where somebody says, well, I want to get to, say, 25% renewable penetration. Well, that comes at a cost, right? And if that cost is greater than what their alternative is, they need to have some justification for doing that. So I think contractually we can deal with what your question posed, right? Mm-hmm. It's whether or not the mining company's board is willing to accept that alternative, which may be 5-10% greater than what some other alternative might be.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't met a mining customer yet who's leaping at the opportunity to shut their mine down so that more renewables can come on board. It really does come down to the economics of what their renewable resource is, what their load looks like, and what the range of technologies and how those technologies are mixed and integrated. These projects are technically very complex to come up with those optimal solutions. Usually commercially very complex, and it is something that takes time, and good data from the mining company or good data on the renewable resource is a great starting point. I think as Todd pointed out, getting that data acquisition running early is a great place for people to start the journey. It's pretty low cost, and it really sets your foot on the path.
Okay, so thank you for that. So I'd like to switch gear. We spoke a lot with hybrid projects in remote locations off-grid. Let's talk about behind-the-meter projects, which we see developing more and more, where the price of renewables are beating grid prices, and then it drives the notion of for mining and for the grid to procure cheaper energy and integrate it to the grid and can wheel it to the mining fund. So do you see this as an opportunity that you see in your market where projects like that develops? And is there an appetite or legislations or regulations that allows to do those kind of projects?
A great and very topical question. If I'm a miner in New South Wales, and just like a house owner, I used to think that the best thing that was with my mine was to be grid connected, I wouldn't even want the grid today. In terms of where the forwards are for New South Wales for the next 3 to 5 years, it's ugly. And you take a leaf out of Sun Metals' book, you look around and you go, I can get solar for part of my load at somewhere between 40 and 50. What on earth am I doing effectively a 3-year forward at 110? So this is the country right now where it is, people are making that exact question. It's not everywhere, but particularly New South Wales, Queensland has a slightly different profile right now. So I see it as it's not a sustainability decision today. It's an actual straight next to 3 to 5 year earnings decision around what do I do.
Mm-hmm. So getting renewable energy into mines, or just into any sort of grid-connected company, and then you're talking behind the meter, in front of the meter, and I think you've addressed behind, and I think that the point is you need to assess what the cost of energy is, and then you need to assess what the delivered cost of energy is, and look, it makes I completely agree. It makes absolute sense to build something behind the meter because you get more money. You don't pay the transmission cost, and you save. You get that extra productivity or efficiency out of the system. I think that what people need to be aware of is what size do you put behind the meter. Because if you put a system that, I talked of a mine that we're working with, and look, they could probably use 80 megawatts, easy, yeah. But the thing is, can they use them all the time? And maybe the answer is not. There is times when they will be exporting because they have shutdowns or just the way the load profile works. Although it's quite flat, there is sometimes when they will be exporting. Now, at the times when they are exporting, if you look at it, how much energy are they exporting? If you put an 80 megawatt, you will be exporting an awful lot of energy. Now, all good. Whether you feed 80 megawatts, well, you need a big piece of land, number one. But number two, whether you connect 80 megawatts, because you can connect something into your switchboard. Can your switchboard hold 80 megawatts? Number one, potentially can. Will the network let you connect 80 megawatts, knowing that at points you can export that amount of money? I would say that you will have a difficult time. It won't be easy. It will become just complex, and then the question will be: is the price there for such a complex agreement? But if you can fit a size where you basically minimize your export, so you can get to a compromise where you accept that you just trip your fuses every time you're not producing, you're not producing on the mine, and just accept that you lose all your exports, then that's a different story. So I think that there is an opportunity for behind the meter, very big. You just need to be conscious about how big you want to go, how much you can achieve. It will potentially not take you all the way to 100%, but it's a step in the right direction that won't hamper you from achieving what you want to achieve at the end anyway.
Okay. Well, I think that question is extremely interesting. We see this progressing among our clients. We're doing studies of really developing projects behind the meter, or on the grid, wheel to the client, or on the grid, sold at spot market. We see all the combinations, and everything you just described is that there's regulations or legislations or willingness for the utility to say yes or no. The excess energy, where does it go? So at the end of the day, it's not simpler than hybrid power projects in remote location. But the opportunity in terms of pricing is there. It's much cheaper, and that's your comment. It's there. So it by force of the pricing being low, it's going to happen. So maybe we go to the audience for questions on our topic.
Thank you. Ray Chatfield from Alcar. Dean, a question for you. I saw in your presentation you had a grid-connected battery system in Brazil. We've got a refinery in Brazil with our partners, and in the north of Brazil. And once a month, almost guaranteed it'll trip out because of grid instability and power sags. How did you find connecting a system in Brazil with the stability issues they have? And was yours in the north of Brazil or elsewhere?
Yeah, so the analysis has been done. That project hasn't become operational yet. The issues you're referring to in the northern part, that's a much more complex system, and involves, if you're referring to the issues that I'm familiar with in Brazil, where you got a multitude of equipment that you would need to do some power factory modeling or similar type modeling to ensure that you're not causing issues with other pieces of equipment. In our case, it's a much more isolated, more simple grid, so we're not dealing with the same complexities that you're referring to.
Michael Scott and Rio Tinto. Just wondering if you've got any thoughts or perspectives you can provide on the developments we're seeing in the commercial and the risk sharing space, right? Just as a different approach.
Look, I'm not quite sure what you mean by the risk sharing. I think certainly in the projects that we develop, the onus is upon us to deliver what we say we're going to deliver, and we'll sign up to performance guarantees to do that. So we do take the risk of delivering on the projects that we buy into. Is that where you're headed with that, or?
If I can just comment, so I'm an IPP guy for many years, in many markets. IPPP, we had it easy and we expected, 20, 25 year feed-in tariffs, 30-year contracts with government, and Rio or the government or whoever would take the risk and you'd pay me whether I operated or whether I turned up. I don't see that as the norm going forward. We are seeing different forms of capital coming in. People are realising that to effectively accelerate and move through, and we're talking a very broad-based transition, not around resources here. We need to come up with different contractual models. We need to do something around retirement and, effectively mothballing. So you end up with more methods coming in. We're definitely getting better support from not just the arenas, but a whole range of financial institutions, because they don't want to make it effectively unpalatable for Rio to sign up. It's how do we make you sign up to effectively to get you over that you're taking all the risk on a contract for 20 years and we get paid out no matter what. And that's where I believe we're moving to much more risk sharing models, but still at effectively an affordable price.
I think the only other element that I can think of that y'all haven't touched on already is we do go to our suppliers and we will push some of the risks, say for instance, back to the battery suppliers, so the actual cell manufacturers, that in the event that something doesn't perform to a certain standard, that we can reach into their pockets and claim some liquidated damages from that, which in turn gives us sort of a hedge against what we're guaranteeing on our side. But your point earlier is really at least within our business strategies, right, we're providing a performance guarantee that regardless of everything up here, we're essentially trying to de-risk that to the mining company in this case. And then how we do that upstream is a variety of things. It may also be somewhat on the financing side. In our case, we balance sheet our projects, but to the degree we wanted to move it off balance sheet, there may be some risks that the debt or equity within that element they may be willing to take as well.
Yeah, the mine closure risk is certainly one that has to be dealt with. If the mine decides to close and the investment has been made, someone has to pay a penalty for that. And if the mine decides to not integrate the renewable power, that is also has to be factored in the contract in terms of sharing of the risk of how much energy can or cannot be curtailed during the year. And in real operation, that is going to happen. So that risk is also part of the complexity of the contract, dealing with those aspects of things.
Yeah, so also, and look on the same conversation about commercial, I know we are addressing it, we haven't addressed it so far as a standalone system perhaps, but there is grid connected mines, we all have grid connected mines, and I think that the risk sharing model in that sense is slightly different. You will be buying electricity from the grid, you will be going for procurement for many gigawatt hours a year, and you have a budget, you're managing towards a budget. What we have seen in the past is that the way people have been dealing basically is, or customers have been dealing is they're looking for a low price. We're not sure that looking for a low price is necessarily the right strategy to manage risk and to share risk. I think we are much more into thinking that we can work with companies like yourselves, but by having a low cost and trying to find the lowest cost energy. So it may be to a supplier like AGL to say, okay, well you need these many gigawatt hours, and you don't need these many gigawatt hours. What you need is you need the mine to work, can we do power factor correction? Can we do power quality and free up space? Can we do energy efficiency and reduce your consumption? And then do you need to get all your energy from the grid? Can we get some behind the meter and reduce your consumption by that? And there is different ways of investment. And in some cases you may have the pockets and you may just want to pay a lot of this upfront. In many other cases you may want just a PPA and have a fluctuating price and just work on the terms in terms of how long you have the contract. In other cases, we may be able to just build a whole package where you're looking at different sources, different products that get implemented, manage them as a budget, and basically amortize the different costs that are involved over time. What you get at the end of a 5-year long-term agreement of energy is you just have all the energy that you need to deliver, plus you get all the equipment that you may have invested on your system, on your mine, and all the upgrades that may have come up with it. So we see it a little bit from there, from why talk about megawatt hours or gigawatt hours and not talk about a budget? You have a budget to manage, let's manage the lowest cost of energy available for that budget.